Coming up next on the Holistic Wealth Podcast.
And so when you go through grief, your life gets really scrambled, but you can turn it sunny side up again. And you have to work really hard at, finding a way. And I don't think that anyone ever is the same person again when you lose somebody that you love. Jer was more than a husband. He was my coach, my mentor, my best friend, my light. And the person who taught me to believe in myself and instilled belief in me. And so I think when we go through something like this, I don't think we ever recover, ever.
You're listening to the Holistic Wealth Podcast with host Keisha Blair, author of Holistic Wealth and founder of the Institute on Holistic Wealth. And now, here's your host, Keisha Blair.
Welcome to the Holistic Wealth Podcast, and I'm your host, Keisha Blair, and today we have an amazing guest back with us on the show, one of my personal favorites, Loren Ridinger. Loren is a distinguished entrepreneur and co-founder of Market America, a leading global product brokerage internet marketing company. Alongside her husband, J.R. Ridinger, Loren has played a pivotal role in transforming the direct selling industry with the innovative on-franchise business model. Beyond her business ventures, Loren is a dedicated philanthropist who supports various charitable causes, including the Make-A-Wish Foundation, breast cancer research, and initiatives to empower and recognize women and children. And her new book is out. It's so amazing. I love it. It's so well done. Scrambled or Sunny Side Up: Living Your Best Life After Losing Your Greatest Love. And what an amazing title. And Loren, the last time we spoke on the podcast, we were talking about the death of my husband, and JR was alive then, and now he's gone. It's surreal that we're having this conversation, but what an amazing book. You did an amazing job. Serena did an amazing job with the Ford. The Ford was written by Serena Williams, everyone. So,
it'll be available February 11th at bookstores everywhere.
At bookstores everywhere and online. Just amazing. And Loren, I know you've been talking about, as we follow along on Instagram, you've been talking about the book and how you came up with the title. But can you tell our audience how you came up with that title?
Of course. It's so good to see you, Keisha, always.
I know.
It's great to be here with you. I think the book was titled Scrambled or Sunny Side Up because, in my 36-year journey with JR, every day he would wake up and say, "Good morning, baby. What should I have? Scrambled or sunny side up eggs?" And, for the first 10 years, I would say, well, scrambled, sunny side up. Maybe you should have an omelet. Maybe you should have scrambled. Maybe you should have sunny side up. And, I used to love that he would ask me what my opinion was and that he cared, that he wanted me to pick for him. And I always thought that was so interesting because it was his stomach, and I was like, why is he asking me? But as we get busy with life and as life takes us over, you start getting busier and other things come into play in the morning and people pulling at you, different priorities. And, he would say, well, maybe you should have sunny side up or scrambled. And I said, I don't know, honey. It's your stomach. What do you want? You decide. Why am I deciding for you? And I would often get frustrated. And, when I think about that was his love language of wanting to know my input and the fact that it's the very reason I fell in love with him. So the fact that I would get frustrated later in life, it was a lesson I learned after I lost him about how much I wish he could ask me today. If it was scrambled or sunny side up, but I don't have the privilege of having that happen anymore. And so when you go through grief, your life gets really scrambled, but you can turn it sunny side up again. And you have to work really hard at, finding a way. And I don't think that anyone ever is the same person again when you lose somebody that you love. Jer was more than a husband. He was my coach, my mentor, my best friend, my light. And the person who taught me to believe in myself and instilled belief in me. And so I think when we go through something like this, I don't think we ever recover, ever get to be who we were before. But I think that you have to discover ways to turn life back around and turn it sunny side up. And this book is filled with incredible stories of that journey of mine with him that really helped instill belief in who I was and who I became. and how to find the inner voice inside of myself to come back out of this and be more than a survivor, but to thrive.
What a wonderful title. And especially when you mentioned how grief just scrambles your life. It's so true. I don't
As you
think
know, you know.
I know that firsthand. Yeah, exactly. And as I read your book, every word resonated with me. It was like I was, walking in your shoes and you had walked mine, which I think in some ways is true. Prior to grief, it is that way. And then afterwards, your life changes forever, for sure. Now, Loren, I just wanted to take us back to the scene of the day it happened. Reading the book and you mentioning, seeing him on the floor and, as things transpired and it happened.
I think I was just in total denial. You
Yeah.
know, they say that you freeze, fear, some people take action immediately and other people freeze up. And, he walked past me. He came very close to me, about a foot close to me. And I said, "Where are you going?" And I was on a conference call. I said, "Where are you going, honey?" And I heard him go with a deep breath. And I was like, "What? Why do you sound like that?" And he's like, I'm fine. Stay here. And it was one of those stay here's like, don't come. And, he let me be the boss, with everything. But there was some times in our life when JR spoke and you just knew that he was the man and you're going to let him be the man. And so I thought maybe he had an indigestion or acid reflux, which he often would have sometimes, after eating. We had a breakfast late that morning. And so I gave him a few minutes and then, 3 or 4 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes passed and he didn't come back up. And I remember I asked my brother, "Could you check on JR for me?" It was on the conference call still. And at that moment, his wife had walked in and said, "Oh, I think he's on the floor stretching, doing yoga." And I knew that he wasn't stretching, doing yoga, that he just walked away. And in that very moment, I dropped the phone. Everybody I forgot was still on the phone. I didn't find out that till much later, many months later, that I never actually hung up the call. And I just started to scream. I knew without even walking down there, I had lost him. And I ran down those stairs and I saw him just, 4 or 5 feet away from me. And I saw his legs and I just could not bear to see his face. I could not see his face and I started to slam my head, I remember, on the wall, just hit my head on the wall till I remember it was bleeding down. But I didn't really care about that. Anything that could take away from the pain I was feeling at the time and to avoid what I was dealing with, I just kept hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And I remember that, my brother and his wife were there, Mark and Maria were there. My other best friend, Truman, came. His wife got sick at the last moment. She wasn't able to come. And Truman and one of the crew members on the boat had closed the door and they were performing CPR. And they closed the door when they saw me smashing my head and they asked me not to come in. But I couldn't make it in. I could not face him that way. I was afraid. And, when I think about, it took me a year of therapy to forgive myself for that.
Yeah.
Because we often blame ourselves, like, what if he heard my voice? What if he talked to me? What if he heard me say, "Yeah, I can't have you go right now. I'm not ready yet." Maybe he would have come back. I could have called him back. But, I have learned to forgive myself for not being able to face him. It was Serena, actually, who said to me, I could not forgive myself. I reenacted the moment with her 100 times. And she said, "Loren, he fell to the floor before he made it to the bed. That breath he took, both the coroner and Serena had told me, that's his last breath. He struggled to catch his breath. And remember, Serena has suffered her own pulmonary embolism. So speaking to somebody who's one of my best friends and a cherished confidant, had said to me, "Listen, you have to stop punishing yourself for this." He took that deep breath. He walked away because he didn't want you to come down those stairs. He never made it to the bed. And if he had sat on the bed, he would have been waiting for you, but he wasn't sitting on the bed. He was on the floor.
Yeah.
And over again, she would reiterate that to me and it didn't click. But one day she looked at me and she said, "What would you have done if your daughter had been there? And Amber had told you, Mama, I can't look at Dad. I can't get to him." I would say, "I understand. Of course, you wouldn't want to see your dad in that way." She said, then why can't you forgive yourself?
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
It was a
Just
very important
unbelievable.
moment in this journey of healing and forgiving
Yes.
who you are. Because as you know, Keisha, you blame yourself a
Oh,
million different.
yeah.
What could I have done? How did I not
Oh,
see?
yeah.
You know, we focused on health and nutrition most of our life. How did we miss this? How did we miss a blood clot?
Right.
It's like, you know, Serena said to me so many times, you were overseas, out in the water. You weren't even in America. You wouldn't have known what to look for. And blood clots often hide
Mm-hmm.
already injuries. And he had a sports injury in his knee, and that's where the clot had been hiding.
Right.
And it kept getting more stiff, his knee, and he couldn't understand why. We never thought for one moment. You know, Jared's parents lived till nearly 100, both of them. His grandmother, 104. He should be here with me today. So I was mad and angry and all the things that you, as a widow like me, have experienced in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Painful.
Yeah. Very
Hard.
painful. And it's unbelievable. Thank you for sharing those moments, those
Yeah,
precious moments with us, because I know how precious they are.
They
those
are.
final moments.
They are. And you don't realize it took a long time for me to be able to discuss even that again. Because, you know, you're torturing yourself while you're doing it. And even now I can see the moment. I can visualize the moment. I feel that moment of pain. I feel the moment. I kept saying out loud as I was hitting my head. I was saying, this is not happening, Jerry. You can't go right now. We're not done with our work. He's going to be fine. And I remember that my friend Truman, a couple times I gained enough courage, he said, to go to the door and try to crack the door. And he closed the door behind me. Say, Loren, don't come in. We're doing everything we can to get it. Don't come in.
Yes.
And in some way, I used that as a way to forgive the fact that I was fearful of seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
I used his words of saying, don't come in. And then I didn't. And I was in denial and in shock. And I remember that the paramedics that came in, and they had asked me to come into the room, and they asked me if they could give me something to calm me down, that I was very worked up, very upset. And, you know, I was creating, obviously, hurting myself. And unintentionally, just action. I was taking action in my own way. I was mad. I was angry at how this could be happening to me. And I was away from my children, you know, my
Yeah.
daughter, my grandkids.
Yeah.
It was the worst of nothing I ever prepares you for it.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And in reading the book, you could tell how excited he was for that Croatia trip. I mean, talking about the different turtles, the 4 kinds of turtles, it's unbelievable. Like I see a lot of boyish wonder in
Yes.
those words. And I thought, wow,
Well,
just goosebumps. And then
I think you've met actually JR before, right? Like for a moment on our last podcast. Did you
maybe
not?
for a
Like
moment.
And the funny thing is, he was, you know, I was looking at this because in front of me he had his Eagle Scout,
Yes.
you know, and not a Boy Scout, he would say, but an Eagle Scout, and all those badges meant something, right, to him. And you know, he was a big fan of nature and big fan of you know, geography and where we were and what was taking place. And he talked about all the turtles and all the things that would happen there. And it's interesting. Recently, I was at my home in Connecticut and I opened up his printer. I hadn't been to his printer for some time. Don't know what made me think to open the door to his printer. And on top of the printer was a map that he had printed right before we went on our trip.
Wow.
And it was a map of Croatia.
Yeah.
And he had done some creative work with his computer and drew out all the places he wanted to stop. And I remember thinking how much he planned for this occasion, that it was something, it was on his bucket list, Croatia. And I didn't understand why for the longest time. I used to say to him, why don't we just go to Italy or the south of France? You know, we love Capri. We love, oh no, I just want to go to Croatia. I've never been and I want us to go see it. And I've heard so much about it. Isn't it interesting? We ended up as our final destination together.
Yeah.
But it's where we ended up. And you know, it's funny how the journey goes.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, now, you know, as it happens with many of us widowed, you're left to, pioneer the ship on your own. And this is a $1 billion company. So this is huge, Loren. And as I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a $1 billion company. This is not just a normal, business.
Well, we spent 36 years of our life together, 30 years together, building this incredible company together, community. and entrepreneurs and a place where people can have their own business in a box and buy products and sell products to others. And so we've become this, from nothing to something. Neither one of us ever had anything. As you know, I married a guy who our big date was Wendy's.
Yeah.
Supercar. And, we ended up making it really big, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. But more importantly, we helped so many people become successful along the way.
Yes.
And I think that after I lost JR, you never really realize how much your partner does because you're so busy in your own world, right?
That's true.
So busy doing the things he expected me, the marketing of the company, and taking care of the things at home. Like I said, he kind of left me. I was a boss in so many ways with JR. He didn't like to make decisions without me, which I really love. That everything we did together. But at the end of the day, when he passed away, I realized I'd never had to balance a checkbook. I never had to worry about the finances. I didn't know anything about the taxes. And because I'd been with him since I was 18 years old, I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't even know where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
And, I decided that I had to be really transparent and open to win this one. And I just was real honest with everybody. And I just said, to my accountants, to my team at the office and in accounting, to my lawyers, to my president and the vice presidents. I said, look, I've never done this. I've done this business. I can do sales. I can do marketing. I've never done a balance to checkbook, never had to do. Jared did it. Jared paid all the bills. Jared knew how to, and Jared was, by the way, Keisha, he never had a money manager. He hand wrote every check still. Yeah. He kept track of everything in Quicken himself. And I was like, how am I going to do this and succeed? And so I asked a lot of questions. And I wasn't afraid to learn. And I wasn't afraid to say I didn't know the answer.
Yes.
And I also would go to his emails and, somebody would ask me like, okay, it's time to pay taxes. And I'd be like, why is it that much money? And I would go back to his email and see if he would write something like it. And he was asking the same questions I was a lot of times. And so I used his email as a guide to help me learn. And the questions, I would see some of the questions he would ask.
Right.
Obviously, he knew way more than I, but I was learning from his own messages were still there to teach me.
Yes.
And I wasn't afraid to be transparent that I didn't know either. I think that sometimes we have so much pride about who we are that we forget we can't be everything.
That's true.
And
That's true.
I asked and I would just say, guys, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Can somebody help me? And I think when you ask people, whether it be with learning to balance a checkbook or understanding finances, or just asking for help in a business, when you're really transparent and you say, look, I don't know the answer, but if you're willing to help me and teach me, I can get it.
Absolutely.
And that helps.
It absolutely does. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about my life and my story. And I mentioned this in Holistic Wealth too in my book, that even though I'm a trained economist, like my husband was a CPA. So he was doing a lot of that accounting stuff. Like I didn't need to look at that stuff.
Of course.
So, of course not. So when he died, even as a trainee, and I'm telling you, Loren, I had to be just as vulnerable as you are right now.
You understand it.
My money confidence was shattered afterwards. And I mention it in Holistic Wealth. And I mean, even though in my day job, I'm an economist, I travel around with the prime minister, I write his notes. But you know what? Accounting wasn't something I was doing on a day-to-day basis.
Neither.
So of course, it
but
happens.
We learn it.
And we learn it.
And we understand, we start to understand the process. And I started to really appreciate the things he was doing that I was completely unaware of. Because I was like, well, what are you working on? Why can't you help me? And then he would be like, Loren, I'm handling all of our money. I'm making sure that the company is financially sound. I pay attention to every dollar that goes out the door. And I didn't really understand how big that was, even though, because he was so intent on making sure that he knew where everything was, how everything was managed, that he reinvested back into ourselves. Jared never was a big investor in other things. He was an investor in himself and other people. And, if it was inside our community, it made him happy to invest. So I really was very attentive to him and learned from him, but I never had to do those things as you didn't. And so we really start to become very vulnerable. Then we question our self-confidence. We question who we are. We question our ability to get anything done. And it really took me a long time. Jared was my my belief. He was the one who was the first one to say, you can do it. You can speak. You're a great speaker. When I was a horrible speaker, he was the first person to say, you're the best female speaker I ever listened to. And, I fainted on the first time I spoke. And it took me time and time again getting back up to feel comfortable speaking. And so when he died, I lost all my confidence.
Yeah.
Everything was poof, gone.
Yeah.
And then you realize that there's this little inner voice inside of you that reminds you that you are capable. And when you quiet the noise around you, and when you pay attention to that person inside you, that you realize that that same person still exists, but they're in the mirror. And when you realize and you get quiet and you've eliminated all the extra noise around you, and you really, because I think you understand this well like I do, and it's hard to understand it unless you've been with it and you understand the experience.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose the person you love so much, you really narrow your circle even more.
Yes.
And you and I both are people who have kept very positive people in our life always.
Yes.
But you even narrow it more if that's possible after the fact, right? And so I got really good in paying attention to what was good for me and what was bad for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I eliminated anything that may have, even though it was good at one point, became bad for me later.
Yeah.
Meaning you pay attention to things like, for instance, going to a party with JR with, 100 couples or 100 important people always made me feel great. But I wouldn't do that today if it's 100 couples that makes me feel sad in the moment, that reminds me of what life looks like today for Loren. That I can be in a room with 100 people, but I'm not going to be in a room with 100 couples because it'll remind me of the other side of me that's missing. And that doesn't mean that I don't hang out with my couple friends I do all the time. It just means I don't put myself in position for other people to question it because they may not understand it. And it's not their fault. I don't think anybody's prepared for grief. I don't think the conversation is had. From the time I was little, I recall my mother telling me when I was young, when my grandparents died at an early age, you're too young to go to the funeral. You don't understand this. We have to keep them away from death. And I'm sure you went through the same thing. No, they're too young.
That's true.
6 years old when my grandmother died, 8 years old when my grandfather died. Like, oh my God, you guys are too young to deal with it. But then when my mother died at 42, wow. It was an eye-opener for me. I was 21 years old and I was like, I lost my mom. I was familiar with grief at this point in a way I didn't want to know it. Mm-hmm. And then I lost my father at 63 and I got really familiar with it. But when I lost Jay, it was a different type of pain. Was so, it hurt me like I cannot describe. It was indescribable, right? It is. You lose the side of you that you love the most about who you are. And
about who you are. And you know what? Your words are so true. And that's why it shatters the confidence. It shatters. I mean, it's undescribable, but you have put it so well, Loren. And that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so I just wanted to ask this question because I know a lot of entrepreneurs listen into this podcast and are thinking, wow, she was leading this, company, $1 billion company. And you mentioned too that, in the book that revenue started slipping. So how did you deal with that part of it to bounce back?
And that's a funny thing. Yeah. It's crazy because you get thrown in these situations that you're not at all ready for. You get thrown into this situation, like you wake up one day, 2 years later now, and you realize that the world has gone on no matter what.
Yeah.
And when people say time heals all, that's a lie. Time doesn't heal anything. It just keeps moving forward. It has no emotion. It has no understanding. It's just a clock and you can't stop it. And we know how much money we have, but we don't know how much time we have.
Yeah.
And you start to realize how valuable time is. And so, I think what happens is that you wake up and you realize like, oh my God, the company has gone on for 2 years, but we need to shake things up. The world has changed, for 32 years, we've been on top of our game, but the world starts to change, right? Where there's a lot of ways to make money in home-based business opportunities today, like we are. So how do we pivot? How do we make a change? And so it's interesting you asked that because I actually just had an incredible meeting with my team last week about I brought everybody together and did a strategic plan. I said, guys, it's time to change. It's time to pivot our thinking. We have to think outside the box. TVs are no longer a necessity. They're an accessory. People are buying and they're scrolling on their phone and they're clicking buy right now. How do we take advantage of the shift in the future? How do we make sure that we understand that, well, 32 years ago, people would join our company so they can have a great at-home business. There are many home-based businesses now, more competition. And when people need to make quick, fast money, they can become Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Instacart moms and dads. And there's this whole new world called the gig economy. How can we fit into that economy so we can serve people right now, but pay them faster, pay them more? And we're basically in the process right now of getting ready to win that too. And we're flipping our program around, pivoting. And you've got to learn how to pivot. You've got to know. And, I think one of Jared's greatest assets was that he could see the future. He was a great visionary. And so I think I talked to him last night and I said, I hope you're watching me and what I'm doing because I'm trying to learn from you and I'm trying to see what the future holds. And I can see that the future is moving into a new way of shopping. And it's not just on computers. And we know that now. We know it's not just on devices. And that we have to bring live shopping to people. And we have to have more conversation with people. And more has to happen. And you have to be on top of your game. And people have to make instant money. You can't wait a week or even, a month or 2 weeks or even a week to get paid. They need to get paid daily.
Yeah.
And we've been able to solve the problem. And so that's what we're doing. And we're actually in the middle of a full pivot, a full strategic plan, one that I feel more confident about than ever. And I feel like it's given me the energy to move into 2025 and beyond in the most positive way, because I can see, you hear about businesses and industries falling apart because they don't pay attention to that.
Yeah.
I think about things like, Xerox, Kodak film, typewriters, all these things over time that have become so important that have disappeared over our lifetime.
Yes.
In an instant. And, I think about if you don't pivot and don't change, then it will change and you won't be ready for it. You may not like the result. And I didn't want to endure that. I didn't want all this work we had put in and not be able to see the future and say, how can we change this? So I think it's really getting quiet. Paying attention to yourself, hearing what you're talking about, talking to younger people, talking to the younger generation, hearing what they have to say, putting some great minds in a room together and keeping it smaller rather than wider.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great.
You can win.
Exactly. It sounds amazing. And so, Loren, we have, Global Holistic Wealth Day coming up in April. And it's on April 9th. And, it's grown so much since it started a few years ago. I'm so happy to you spoke about purpose and meaning in the book. And this is just a big part of, the whole purpose and meaning. And I'm so happy to be sharing it with you because you're a holistic wealth trailblazer. And honestly, one of the strongest women I know, honestly, just watching your journey. And I know when we go through grief, we don't necessarily feel that way, but those looking on are so inspired. So Loren, you've been through, the worst tragic experience. What words do you have for people who are going through this now?
I think you just have to find it in your heart to have grace for yourself. Forgive yourself for the things you do not know and the things you will need to learn. Find it in your heart to not feel guilty for the things you cannot control that are out of your hands. And look in the mirror and start to find and believe in you again. And really search in your soul and remind yourself that you are more than enough, that you are more than capable, that you are capable of doing anything you want to do and you're made of all the right things right now. And that we so often listen to the noise around us. And sometimes it's really important to shut the world out. And that's the only thing I can say about grief that I have found good and bad in. It's like I have found good in shutting out the world. It's bad because you can't be alone too long, but it's good because you need to find the strength to be alone.
Yeah.
You need to find the strength to be alone and to show yourself that because it's a big step to just be alone. So the fact that you can show up for yourself, believe in yourself. And then the way I tackled it, and I've always done, I've always lived by the rule to do the hardest things first in my day. And so I started to institute that same message that I've taught for 30 years to not only myself, but to thousands of entrepreneurs, which is do the hardest things first every day, and you will accomplish more than most people do in one day, an entire month that it takes somebody else. And I think when you do those hard things first, all of a sudden you've set yourself up to succeed. You end up being done by noon. And by noon, you realize, like, even if you work for somebody else, the hard things are already done. You've done all those things. Everything else is cake for the day. Everything else is all the things you want to do. And if you get to work like you and I, and you get to do the things that you love every day, then the rest of the day you can be creative. You can think through new ideas. You can take new actions, create new initiatives. And I've realized that that part of success, of doing the hard things first, has created success for me again.
Yeah.
By knocking those out. When you start creating little success stories for yourself, you'll be on your way. You can make it. You have everything you need to do it, to go for it, to be the best version of you. Grief is not easy. Nobody ever prepares us for this type of pain. People shelter us from it. They don't talk about it. They don't teach it in school.
No.
And you have to learn it the hard way. And oftentimes I've said that we should spend more time teaching people what it feels like to have your heart ripped out.
Yeah.
To know what it's like to lose your right arm, your left arm, your body, your soul, your head, your heart, and I think the thing you miss the most about the person you love is that pillow talk, right? You get in bed at night and you have someone to talk to. And when everything comes together at night, you're like, did I do this right? Did I do this right?
Exactly.
I've done it this way. Should I did this wrong? There's nobody to talk to. Guess who you need to listen to? You.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
You gotta believe in yourself. You gotta trust in you. You gotta believe that you're capable, that you're more than enough. And I just have so much grace and so much love for so many people who have went through this. And I think we need to talk about it more. Like you said, Keisha, I think it helps so many people. And it's a part of the healing journey.
Absolutely. And, those words are so encouraging, and it's so true because I've lived it. So I know. Absolutely.
I know you have. You've been through so much. And I think that we need to remind people that they're not alone, that we're here.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that I'm sharing this with you. It feels so special to me right now. You have no idea, because I know, what it is to walk this road. And so, Loren, the book is amazing. If you're listening in, everyone, you have to get your copy. It's amazing. Like, you will absolutely love it. So
it's
Loren,
it's really for anybody who's not just experienced grief, but somebody who's lost themselves along the way. Somebody who's lost who they are, their identity. And it's filled with stories that have been a part of mine and JR's journey that have taught me along the way. And I know that it will inspire others and help you identify how important you are, and to find your own identity in yourself, and to pay attention to those important moments. And it's available February 11th in bookstores everywhere.
Amazing. Loren, thank you so much for coming back to share this amazing book and to share your experience with our audience. We so appreciate it. We'll always love having you.
I love you, Keisha. And
I love you too.
So
and
much,
I'm
so proud of you.
I'm so honestly, I'm so happy that we can share this with everyone, that you can share this. Your story, it's a gift. It's a gift to the world. And I know it's out of sheer heartbreak, but so many are going to be touched by it, and so many lives are going to be saved.
I hope so. That's the intent. JR always said, if we help people succeed along the way, we automatically succeed. Yeah. And I believe that with all my heart more than ever now. And I think that this book has become my diary, my healing journey, my, insight to me and how to fix things along the way, and what I saw go wrong, and the things I want to do right for the future. And, the little notes and the little things that we can do while we're still alive, and where we can make a difference. And I think that's the most important reason to read it, is because we really should operate a little bit differently. Sometimes so fast that we don't slow down to appreciate life. But, I'm in this with you, Keisha. You're never alone, and I love you. I haven't seen you in a long time, and I'm so happy to see you on.
I'm so happy too, and I love you, and so much love, Loren. And so, audience, the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the major bookstores.
All bookstores everywhere.
Everywhere. Get your copy. It's amazing. And Loren, once again, thank you so much for being here.
We'll be in touch soon. I'll text you soon. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye, sweetie.
The Holistic Wealth Podcast with Keisha Blair is brought to you by Have you joined the Institute on Holistic Wealth? If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Choose your membership plan at the Institute on Holistic Wealth/memberships to join. As a member, you'll get access to free worksheets, advice, coaching, and an intentional design workshop. As you start to live a more holistically wealthy lifestyle, you'll want to stay for a very long time. So go to Institute on Holistic Wealth/memberships to join. If you haven't read the book yet, pick up a copy of the award-winning best-selling Holistic Wealth 36 Life Lessons to help you recover from disruption, find your life purpose, and achieve financial freedom.